Uh, so in this video, we're going to talk about another opening free writing prompt. This is one that I have used consistently on the first day where I teach my students revision strategies. So this is something I always do. Every project I introduce a set of revision strategies. I think that's really, really important because often students don't have a good sense of how to actually revise. And part of what this opening free write does is gets them thinking about revision as a process and asks them to reflect on what they do. And that's pretty much actually what the opening free write is. So basically, what I put on the board as the opening free write is what revision strategies do you usually use to finalize an essay and why? Or what revision strategies, if any, do you usually use to finalize an essay and why? So I ask them to think about their own writing process. And of course, writing process is a very important component of rhetoric and composition classes as they are typically conceptualized, at least in the US education system. This idea that writing goes through a series of steps and we can adjust things at different steps in order to get a better outcome, right? And so in order to do that, in order to make those kinds of adjustments, we need to be aware of how we're doing things and why we're doing things the way we're doing them. And revision is a step that often, again, students are not particularly taught how to do. It's not something that necessarily comes to the forefront in, say, high school writing classes, things like that. Particularly if the high school English curriculum is really built around literature more than rhetoric and composition. So I tend to get a lot of different types of answers, actually, with this question. Occasionally people will say, I just finished drafting it and turn it in, which I actually think is much more common than students often answer. And part of this may end up being that the students who say, I don't do anything to revise, are probably less likely to share their opening free write if I'm just taking volunteers. So that's maybe a component of that. But I have had students say that in the past. Sometimes students will say, I read my essay aloud and then I correct anything that doesn't sound right. Students will often say, I just read over it a couple of times. Maybe they read back over the assignment sheet or the writing prompt or something to try and make sure that they're meeting all of their requirements. Often there will be a few students who say, I have somebody else read over it and then I work from their feedback. So these are all standard elements, actually, of the revision process, and they can be quite good. One of the things is that I think most students, when they approach the revision process, they do tend to think about it on the level of like grammar, mechanics, sentence structure, things like that. So sort of lower order concerns, the kind of polishing level detail work. And so one of the things I do want them to start thinking about is more large-scale, higher-order revision concerns. Things like structure, things like the thesis, things like the interconnection of ideas in different paragraphs, etc., etc. These sort of more complex elements to effective writing. And so one of the reasons why having students think about their own revision process that they currently use is that as I move toward the lessons on revision, and I do tend to start by talking about breaking revision up into large-scale changes, mid-scale changes, and fine detail work. And then I introduce specific concrete strategies they can use. One of the things that is beneficial about having students reflect on their own process is they can they can think about what level they traditionally work at for revision. And again, often that's grammar and mechanics and things like that. And so these are very lower level things. And as I start pushing them to think about higher level things, higher order concerns, they can sort of look at how their writing process develops. And hopefully they can sort of reflect on what they're doing now based on what they've learned in the class versus what they were doing before, and how that's helped them to grow and develop as a writer.